My name's Kevin McDermott, and I'm here to give a short introduction to Imperas and the work we're doing with RISC-V. And we'd like to talk about what we're doing at Embedded World 2020. So, as an opening statement, we believe that nobody would tape out a chip without simulation. In today's state-of-the-art SoC flows, every chip is heavily tested and verified before it goes to fab. And really, the whole phrase of prototype is redundant these days. We believe software should have the same rigor, and that nobody should deploy software until it's been exhaustively simulated and tested. We're a small company. We're based out of the UK. We're 10 years old, not a startup. And we're really founded around the whole EDA design flow of the verification of SoCs. So SoC, for RISC-V, SoC spells freedom. This is freedom of innovation. So you may have heard the difference between free speech and free beer. Free speech gives you the ability to influence your design and optimize and tune for your application. Free beer is a little different, but come back at 5 o'clock and there will be free beer. So one of the freedoms you get is to choose your IP provider for your SoC. So amongst us here today, we have a number of the commercial IP companies that will provide you a core that's very capable. The other option, of course, is to build a device completely yourself from scratch using the open specifications. We really recommend you look at the compliance suite and think about your verification plan. There's also a number of open source cores of different quality that are available. Again, a great starting point, but we really think you want to look at some of the verification options that may be ability to extend and verify those cores. All of these options come with the RISC-V capabilities of custom instructions, which is great. You can now tune and optimize your design with unique instructions that really fit your application and your software. So in that case, you really want to look at your verification and test plan. So some of you may not be familiar with Multicore, and of course there is the single core classic embedded design, but you can add multiple cores. They can share memory and coexist and work on the same problem, or they could be a many-core array where you have different tasks allocated to different processors. And then the heterogeneous multi-core is where you have designs of a different architecture and a different capability. These all come together on the SoC to complete your whole design. Then to run an OS, you can run SMP Linux on a multi-core cluster, and then in the future, these sort of design structures are moving towards many core arrays, many clusters of heterogeneous cores, and also the vector processing. So one thing's for sure, there is no short of the compute demand in these devices in the future. So as you want to add a custom instruction, we think a good place to start is your application software. You can take your full workload, your full OS, and your application, and profile your code, and look for hotspots and tight routines where a candidate instruction could help your application. We think the software is a great starting point to look at these custom instruction capabilities. So then moving along the flow, as you start to identify a particular instruction that has some merit, you can build that into your model, simulate your whole design, and then look to see if that instruction really delivered your extra performance that you were looking for. As you work through an organized flow that we provide, we keep track of all the documentation as you iterate through designs, as you look at different metrics and trade-offs, to really keep you in that complete loop as you iterate through and find that optimal best instruction. And then, of course, that becomes a functional spec that leads into the verification that will be critical as you've just developed a brand new instruction. You need to make sure that works in your application. So RISC-V is great. It opens up all these freedoms, but also represents a couple of challenges. It's an open ISA. Obviously, we know RISC-V is a non-profit organization. In the traditional world of IP, it's really bringing a different change. But the key thing here is the ecosystem that's built up around RISC-V, as you'll see here in the members here today. RISC-V is really an ecosystem-based infrastructure that allows this flexibility for all these variabilities and changes that will happen. So the CPU DV process is actually the secret source of the IP industry. Today, if you wanted to go and buy an ARM or a MIPS core, very, very capable cores, very well validated and proven. All of that methodology is the in-house knowledge and expertise. So looking at the way you want to verify a design is you look at the needs of the functions you need to look for, create the tests, develop your plan, generate a large number of test suites. A processor is a complex multi-state option. So you look at the RISC-V specification, you can look at the number of options and configurations, and we typically model around 60 functions within a RISC-V processor to give you an essence of all that flexibility. So within RISC-V, we developed a reference model. We used this initially with the compliance suite to develop the first generation of test suites that are available to show on GitHub, how you can compare your device and make sure it's fully compliant with the ISA specification. This has now been extended to support the vector extensions and also bit manipulation. And again, is a reference for the architecture. And it's free. What's better than that? You can get this on GitHub, and it's also available in the compliance working group. And this is a fully functional single-core instruction-accurate processor model. And this is a flow to help you with design verification. So working with Google, they have an instruction stream generator that generates a random set of instructions that are legally valid. Now it is constrained, so it doesn't produce unexpected or weird cases, but it does produce extreme corner cases. So over time, you can fully test the envelope of your design. Those instructions can be compiled and then run through the RTO of your processor. That's great. You can also run them through the instruction-accurate reference model from Imperas. And then you can compare the two. In this case, we're using metrics, but we work with all the top EDA companies. And then you look at the instruction coverage. Now, some of you may have questioned, why do we look at the coverage at the end of the process? If the instructions were generated from Google, the question would be, why don't you look at the coverage out of Google? Why do you need to do the rest of that work? The answer is, I know you probably know this in the audience, the reason is it's a processor. A processor is unlike a regular SoC design. A processor has many complex states, and it loves to take interrupts and exceptions. So while you might have a pure stream of instructions on one side, as they run through the processor in real time, you take an exception, you may stop the functional trend that you were expecting. So your coverage needs to come at the end of what you actually saw. That's how you know how test is complete. We've extended this and added the vectors and the bit manipulations. So we can now cover all of the tests that are currently available. Now, in addition to that, we also work with System Verilog. This works with DV engineers that want to build a virtual platform to test their environment with the real RTL. So we're running an RTL simulation with our embedded model. And this is an example here, very similar to the earlier flow, but in this case, we're taking the compilation and running it on the real RTL of your system with an embedded processor model inside. And this lends itself to using, obviously, our verification processor for directed tests, and then a comparison step by step. So now you're running an RTL simulation of your processor, instruction accurate with the model to see exactly where the functions deviate. This is a great way to feedback where your problems are and where you need to pay more attention. So everybody likes to see an example. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is a well-known processor. It's now called Ibex. It originally came out of ETH Zurich, and it's quite a popular core and available on open source. Did you know it had some bugs? Yes, surprisingly, open source cores can have bugs just like any other design. So this was the experiment using the Google instruction stream generator, classifying the bugs that were found. So interestingly, a number of the bugs are actually in the debug mode. The whole point of debug mode is to help you debug the software on the final silicon when you get your prototype back. So it would be a pretty shame if there was a bug that was in your debug mode that actually prevented your chip functioning when you wanted to debug your software. So why not test that before you tape out? As I said, That's our experience with virtual platforms. So a number of the other categories of bugs are complex. These are not simple case scenarios. As I said, a processor is a complex option. This is a little bit more of a diagram of those categories of bugs that were discovered using the Google instruction stream generator, comparing with a reference model. And if you were going to tape out a design, this is the sort of sleepless night you want to avoid by running all these tests well before tape out. We recently announced a collaboration with Mentor to combine the Mentor Questor simulator with our instruction accurate processor model and give us coverage results. And then yesterday we announced the DV environment with the UVM test flow, putting our processor model in System Verilog. And we got some supporting quotes here from Sci5, Open Hardware, and Alan Barn, who's chair of the RISC-V compliance working group. So the conclusion, the RISC-V processor is a great attribute for your design, and including that is going to give you many advantages, but you need to look at the test and verification as you work through your design flow. As a golden model, we represent an ideal reference point to help with the verification process. It's very efficient, it runs at full speed, you can develop your full software. And what we recommend, as you look at your custom instruction, as you extend the capabilities, as you look at an open source processor or develop a processor from yourself, look at the test plan and look at the DV flow. So my name's Kevin McDermott, and there's some links here to follow up offline. We've got Imperas.com, RISC-V, and OVP World. This is where our models live, and our compliance the compliance suite also includes our free OVP Sim reference simulator. My name's Kevin McDermott. Thank you for your time.